Greetings to everyone, friends. Today we're going to discuss a very interesting topic. I get these questions quite often. If mobilization starts in Poland, for example, if Russia wants to attack a NATO country or Poland directly, what will happen? Because there are a lot of comments saying that the borders won't be closed, people will be free to leave, and it won't be like it was in Ukraine. Let's try to figure this out a bit today, go through the stages, and also talk at the end of this video about the role of Ukrainians who will be living in Poland. Even in the case, for example, if a war starts, and I'll say in advance that I hope these times never come and that Russia never harms anyone again. If you're interested in this topic, subscribe to the channel, leave your likes, write comments, and thank you to each of you. And first of all, there is such a law in Poland. It was adopted and updated last year. It's the Act on the Defense of the Fatherland, and it clearly states that the defense of the state is the duty of all citizens of Poland. In the event of war, mobilization can be introduced. I think that's clear. Who is subject to mobilization in Poland? Absolutely all citizens of Poland. Gender, male or female, is not currently separated from the age of 18 to 60, and this is the basic framework, exactly the same as in Ukraine. Who can be subject to mobilization? For whom are the borders currently closed? Well, at the beginning, as it was, it's citizens aged 18 to 60. Next, about how and whom they have to and will mobilize. The first to be mobilized are, in fact, professional soldiers, those who are already serving in the Polish army. They are the first to switch to combat mode. Most likely, it's exactly the same as it was in Ukraine. Next, the active reserve comes into play. These are, in fact, former military personnel, people who have completed military courses and members of the territorial defense. So all of them already have what's called a mobilization summons as of today. They know their unit, they know what to do if mobilization starts, if war breaks out. These people already know exactly what to do and where to go. And only after that there is a third category, the so-called passive reserve. These are all civilian citizens who may be fit for service. And today in Poland there are several fitness categories. A, B, C, D. A means fully fit, B means temporarily unfit, fit only during wartime, some are limited fit, and there are those who are completely unfit. How will a person be summoned? In case of mobilization, so-called call-up cards will be sent out, and they will clearly state the place of arrival, the time, and the military unit. And after receiving such a card, the person is required to appear. Failure to appear or evasion is subject to criminal liability. And no one there will be running after these citizens like in Ukraine, catching them on the street, forcing them into vans like it happens there. You know, we won't have that kind of situation here. So, you just receive the document, and in principle they can be brought in by different means. There are discussions in principle about expanding the range of those who can handle this. Not only local government bodies, but also various postal and courier services. In that case, it will just be clear. So, if you don't show up, it's criminal liability. If you do show up, well, then you go serve. And, you know, even with all this, you have to clearly understand that the level of corruption in Poland is much lower than the level of corruption in Ukraine. And the Polish authorities don't spit in their citizens' faces like that. Unfortunately, that's what happens in Ukraine, when we see that corruption and various embezzlements have been happening since the very first weeks, the very first months of the war. And when people saw this, their patriotic enthusiasm, diminished a bit, because every corruption scandal kind of reduces that patriotism, puts it in perspective. And a person starts to wonder, do I really want to go fight? While these others are stealing and taking millions abroad along with their families and so on. So, moving on. About the Poles who are abroad, we know that a huge number of Poles live outside the country. In absolutely every country, in Germany, in France, in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in Denmark, well, in Norway, for example, in France, absolutely in every country of the European Union, everywhere. We know that there are a lot of Poles, and not only in the European Union. Yes, Poland can mobilize its citizens, even if they live abroad. There are certain challenges, procedural exceptions, yes. If a person has dual citizenship and permanently resides outside of Poland, sometimes they may not be subject to defense obligations. Yes, but again, these will be exceptions. There's also the question of how this should be implemented, which is also not entirely clear. For example, if a Pole lives, say, in the United States of America and only has a Polish passport without an American one, it's very interesting how such a person is supposed to be mobilized and at whose expense, for example, they should get back to Poland if they are mobilized. Because within the territory of the European Union, it's more or less clear because there will be data. Information will simply be given to the governments of other countries that our citizens are there, there, and there. Please return them to us. Use your authorities. And this could theoretically happen. So we also see that those who will be subject to mobilization are Ukrainians who receive Polish passports. So even if a Ukrainian gets a Polish passport now, it's important to understand that in the event of mobilization, the obligations will be exactly the same as for other Polish citizens. So it's necessary to clearly understand this responsibility. So if a war starts somewhere and you don't want to go to that war, then probably in that case it would be better to leave the territory of Poland in order to buy yourself some time. But in general, you also need to understand that, everyone wants to get citizenship here, citizenship there, citizenship everywhere. But here you also need to clearly understand that when you get a second passport, you also take on additional responsibilities. And just like in Ukraine, we know that it doesn't matter if a person has Romanian citizenship. If someone has Ukrainian citizenship in Ukraine, that person won't be allowed to leave the country, even if they want to leave using their Romanian passport. It used to be easier to do this, but now it's much harder to monitor. Ukraine only recognizes its own citizenship, and Poland will also be watching. If you are a citizen of Poland, you have to go to war, even if that person also has, for example, a Ukrainian passport. As for the border closures, I've read a lot of information about this, including various forums, what people are writing, and what the Poles themselves are saying. In the event that mobilization starts, those who think logically clearly understand that the borders could indeed be closed. I have also changed my opinion. Not long ago I thought, damn, no, they can't close them, it's impossible. But actually anything can be done, and it can all be done very easily. Even now, for example, at the Polish-German border, there are already basically border checks. And it will literally be a matter of 1 or 2 days when they take control of absolutely all the checkpoints. And basically the entire borderline there, absolutely all the roads that exist and so on. Maybe it will take a little more time to close off all the fields as well, so that people don't escape. Of course, if those people even try to escape at all. So to deploy some mobile checkpoints to use the police and other law enforcement agencies for this. This probably won't be a problem if Poland understands that they can't afford to let all citizens of conscription age leave the country because someone needs to be mobilized. So this can definitely happen as well, and this needs to be clearly understood. And that's why the Poles also understand this very well. And the part that is not infantile and understands that the borders can be closed, just like in Ukraine. We know that for the last 1.5, 2 or 3 years, they are massively buying, for example, real estate in Spain, which is why prices for all that real estate immediately went up. And many people are moving their assets there to feel more secure. So now, with these narratives about the possibility of a war in Europe starting from Russia in the coming years, some even say it could start this year. The more rhetoric like this there is, the more people will realize it and let these thoughts into their minds. The more they will think about how to leave, what to do, and so on. Now, the next thing that concerns Ukrainians living in Poland, people also ask what will happen. Can they be mobilized? Also, there are various inadequate people who like to throw dirt at Ukrainians. Abroad they write that if a war starts in Europe, you'll be sent to fight and die for Poland. Friends, no one will send anyone because Poland has neither the right nor the ability to mobilize citizens of another country for its defense. In the same way, this is clearly stated in the Homeland Defense Act that this duty applies exclusively to Polish citizens. If someone is a citizen of Ukraine or, for example, Belarus, no one can force them to go to the front. Perhaps some international legions will be created in such a case, but yes, it would be exactly the same as, by the way, what is happening now in Ukraine. If mobilization starts in Poland and some military actions begin and martial law is introduced there, then in fact Ukrainian citizens will have more freedoms than Polish citizens, because they will not actually fall under this Homeland Defense Act. So that's also a very interesting point. And just like now in Ukraine, foreigners feel much better than men of conscription age. It will be exactly the same in Poland, when Ukrainians will feel much freer than Polish citizens. That's the story. We also understand that in this case, some Polish men will actually lose their jobs because they will have to go to the front or join the military. And at the same time, Poland will need even more workers to support the home front and actually keep the economy functioning in some effective way. And this is exactly where Ukrainians will also play a very important role in somehow ensuring the functionality of the Polish economy, so that everything simply doesn't fall apart. That's the story, friends. For now, everything is still calm. This is just a purely hypothetical scenario of what could happen. So we hope that such a scenario will never happen, that Poland will never have to declare mobilization in its lifetime, and that Russia won't invade Europe to cause the same kind of trouble they're causing in Ukraine right now. What do you think about this? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to read them. Have a great day. See you next time.